Sal Vetri here, and I'm joined, first time hosting a show, first time on a show today, with, happy to introduce, Fast Eddie Fear himself. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very well. Ciao, ¿cómo estás, Salvador?
There we go. There we go. Ciao. Ciao, ciao. I'm excited to do the show with you, Eddie. 6 game slate, Saturday. Very excited with this NFL going on, but also have the NBA tonight doing the dual role show here. But before we get into it, going to do my first official as well ad read. So shout out to Super Draft for that one. Congratulations for that. Check out Super Draft. They have a new mode here. It's not anything to do with salary caps. It's multiplier based, so you can say goodbye to those salary caps. Build a dream team is what they're calling it there, and they have game modes in all different sports. So you can play the NBA, you can go for NFL as long as that's going, all the way until the other sports, PGA as well, starting up. If you use the promo code AWESEMO, you can claim $20 in super cash on your first deposit of $100 or more. They also have an app store. Superdraft.io is where you can get the app in the app store. Superdraft, no limits, more winning. So again, promo code is AWESEMO, $20 in super cash, $100 deposit. You ready for a 6-game slate today?
It's juicy. There is a lot going on. Like you have like a completely worthless game in Denver, or not completely worthless, but there's not a ton going on there, and it's not exciting. And then every other game, there's balls in the air, injured people, news, drama, CP3 and Rondo spitting at each other. Like there's all sorts of fun stuff going on tonight. So I'm here for this slate.
Yeah, I agree. And it seems like every single Saturday and Sunday slate has something like this, something like a LeBron getting ruled out, AD news as well, but just superstars getting ruled out, taking off the weekends, maybe enjoying some NFL football. But yeah, I mean, I think that we discussed earlier, since there wasn't a show before this, we can go sort of game by game through this, try and hit on a bunch, but then make sure we have some time at the end for questions. That still sound good?
Yeah, questions and some chaos. I think we're going to get, obviously, some news is breaking. We still have some pending things going on about, still Whiteside news is still up in the air. Obviously, Anthony Davis being the critical one, and that being in exactly our post lock. Probably don't get by the time we get off the air, but not impossible. So definitely, yeah. I figure we run through, hit the high notes on everything real quick, because we didn't have the traditional 5 o'clock show today because of the football, and then leave ourselves open to take advantage of whatever chaos erupts towards lock.
I like it. Yeah, let's start on the high notes, like you said. I like that format. And let's start right away with New Orleans and Boston. One of these games in New Orleans is where you're getting a lot of this injury news. You're going to have Holiday missing another game here. You have Favors ruled out, and recently Redick going from out to doubtful to out right before we jumped on air here. So with those three guys out today, I mean, it's seeming like for me, you see bumps for Brandon Ingram, huge. You see bumps for guys like Josh Hart here, and Ingram, notably a 1.42 fantasy point per minute guy, with both Favors, the rebounding boost, and also Holiday, the assist boost there, and just shot production off the court. So what is standing out for you on the New Orleans side with all these injuries? Any cheaper players, potentially in Alexander Walker? And where do you want to go here?
Yeah, I really like this whole team at this juncture. There's a lot of site-dependent plays tonight. We'll try to cover them all incredibly, but Alexander Walker probably third in most people's value ranks at this point, behind Rondo and Jackson Hayes, depending. It's interesting at this point where it seems like on say FanDuel, where Jackson Hayes is probably my least favorite of those three players, because he completely shuts down center for you. And there's so much other really good value that might project a little worse than him, depending on what numbers you're looking at. But there are a lot of really attractive players who don't cost a lot that you can smatter across your lineup and leave yourself up into the giant upside of, obviously, Drummond is going to be everyone's first name there, but certainly Jokic has a shot to spike a pretty high ceiling game here, and a couple other players. So I imagine I have Hayes at the bottom there, but I think I would come away with a massive amount of Alexander Walker at $100 over the minimum on both FanDuel and DraftKings. I have him for 29 minutes. Let's talk about yesterday's game for a second, because again, this team on a back-to-back, we have a goodly number of teams on the back-to-back. Celtics on an island, but this is the back end of a road back-to-back series for these Pelicans. And if we take a look at yesterday's slate, now we have the 11 minutes that Derek Favors played before he injured his hammy and took off for the day. That's going to get, we can kind of ignore that because that'll get thrown on to Jackson Hayes, who I have at 34 minutes, and some Jahlil Okafor. Maybe you get Melly picking up some more time. We can sort of set that aside. But now we also have to find a way to distribute those extra 23 minutes that JJ Redick played yesterday. And Lonzo already played 38. Josh Hart already played 37. Brandon Ingram already played 39. So those minutes have to go to likely some combination of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Etuan Moore. Maybe you get Frank Jackson picking up some more time, but I'm pretty big fan of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who I think can very possibly get somewhere in the range of 30 minutes for basically no price. Now, obviously, this is not a brilliant matchup for anyone here other than Vincent Poirier and Bob Williams. This is basically a fully healthy Celtics team at home, not on a back-to-back, and you have these road-tripping Pelicans here. So the spot itself is pretty damn bad, but especially when you look at, say, Alexander Walker, the price versus the opportunity is hard to get away from. So he would be close to my favorite value. It's going to change site by site, but on FanDuel, you have the monster ceiling games of some of the centers, and point guard is brilliant. Even if you set aside sub 4K Rondo, you have Bledsoe at a dumb price. I have a good bit of appeal for Satoransky. Ben Simmons is still way too cheap in a world without Joel Embiid. And Luka Doncic, who is priced, all of $300 more than Andre Drummond at 11.3, where he's actually underpriced in that particular matchup. So it's an interesting situation, but I do think Alexander Walker right now would probably rank as my favorite value play of the day. And again, talking about FanDuel, for example, Josh Hart might be the next one, who's only 4,600. And I don't have any issue with those being the two shooting guards you end up with in a lineup there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And if you look at it, there's a pretty good sample. You have close to 250 minutes with all these guys off the court for New Orleans, including Redick. No Redick, no Favors, and really no Holiday, the big one. This is a guy who's over a 1.1 fantasy point per minute producer this year. So when you're giving him that run, you said 29, I have him at 28. Yeah, he grades out as like a top 3 value on the slate, and he's looking really good. And then you also have Ingram, a player who's approaching now over 1.4 fantasy points per minute with these guys off the court. Really big sample of almost 300 minutes. Where would you say he ranks out for you, just coming up into that 8K range, and actually saw a pretty decent price drop, at least on DraftKings, of $800?
Yeah, that's he probably in cash would be my first player in, as far as just a non-value first player in, as far as points per dollar. 8,400 is incredibly too cheap. If you're not going there, you're thinking they get horribly blown out, and even then there's a bit of just having enough bodies count going on there where you'd still think he gets 30 something minutes. But as you very accurately and again, I'm a fan of your work, of Sal's work. I've caught a couple of your videos in the past. I think you do a great job breaking things down. So I was excited to be on next to you, and I think you covered this situation really well to a T. When you get their better bigs out of there, and when you get Drew Holiday off the court, just all the extra peripherals that Brandon Ingram really does an excellent job at already flow to him a little understandably. He is correctly priced on FanDuel, where he is a scotch under 10K. $8,400 is just too cheap for what you should reasonably expect out of him here. I imagine optimizers spit him out pretty healthily. I don't know where he is projected to be owned right now, but I'm a big fan of Brandon Ingram. I have some concern for Jackson Hayes. He's been very good his last couple games. I think he averages somewhere in the area of, I think he's somewhere a hair over 5 fouls per 36. I have some foul trouble concerns for him. I can see that coming up. I can see them wanting some offensive punch. I can see them rolling small with Melly. When you talk about, the certitude that we can expect all these guys to see minutes, I certainly think the most likely scenario is Jackson Hayes starts. That's almost a certainty, and plays 30 some odd minutes. But I am not surprised to see his minutes take a bit of a hit due to something going a little squirrely, including this game turning into a skunking. Again, we mentioned you're looking at New Orleans on the road, back-to-back, Boston healthy at home. And just also not being incredibly productive, not an impossibility for Jackson Hayes. So, but Ingram, it's a tough to fail spot for him. So I'm a pretty big fan of Brandon Ingram. And again, I have Jackson Hayes rated as double A's. It's really hard to get away from him at that price, but I'm, on FanDuel, I'm comfortable getting away with that to get away from some chalk, pile in some extra upside. Again, he's looked good these last couple games, but his body hasn't filled out that way. He's got traditional rookie problems for a big man. The fouls are a little bit too endemic, doesn't always rotate that well. So you have to like him at that price. But I suspect it's going to be site dependent, but I suspect I'd end up a little under the field on Jackson Hayes because, again, there's just so much superlative value all across the slate.
Yeah, it's fair. Right now, we have him coming in with a recent update of 40 minutes ago. He's coming in at 36.1%. Wouldn't be shocked to see that go a little bit higher, but there are some other cheap center options on the slate that we'll get to. Anything else on this side of the ball? You have a cheap Lonzo right now at 6,700. Is there anything else that stands out?
I'm a big fan of Lonzo, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And I mentioned in the chat a couple times, but for those of you not following, yeah, Lonzo was a guy this whole year who was I basically at the start of the year always have this list of guys who I know are going to get better, and there were and he's been on the list for a long time, and I'm like, he just looks really good. I think he's going to be just fine. You had a combination of a couple of random foul trouble games, blowout games, some random lineup dickery, and eventually just, we've really started to see both the time and the production come around. He's still just not expensive enough with all those guys out. You have a real chance of, picking up your assist double-double, even a rebound triple-double. The matchup, not great, but FanDuel, a brilliant play at 6,100. DraftKings, 6,700. Little easier to get away from. Is point guard only, but I'm a big fan of Lonzo. I'm just a big fan of this team where, again, you have to presume they're going to throw really big minutes on these guys. Etuan Moore, I'd have trouble getting there on DraftKings. FanDuel, I would have a reasonable bit of exposure to him. I think it's 3,900 versus 45, and small forward on FanDuel, where there's a lot of good ones and a lot of good cheap ones, but I'd have a reasonable amount there. DraftKings, where I'm not saving that much off Josh Hart. I'm going to end up with Josh Hart more often than not there. But yeah, and as far as rules go, I do agree that a rule of only having a maximum of 2 of Hart and Walker and Moore makes sense. I like that as probably the only rule I'd stick in. I don't really mind terribly at their prices if I end up with Lonzo, Hart, Walker. Yeah. It's not ideal. I'm not going to build one lineup and put, those 3 Narlands guards in there, but only 2 of those 3 will end up closing. I think the 2 most likely are Walker and Hart, but you have a chance of Moore taking one of those spots, and that's very relevant to keep in mind. Moore wouldn't play in the blowout. So, yeah, so I think that is probably the one rule I would set there. I guess if you have some exposure to Okafor in your build, I wouldn't have Okafor and Jackson Hayes. I'd set that rule too, and I would have a few Jahlil Okafor lineups. Again, I expect him to be the most likely to benefit. If you just get it wouldn't shock me to see a scenario where you have less likely Tice, but more Cantor doing a strong job against Hayes and him maybe getting a hook. Like, there's just a few ways he gets pulled out of this game. So, it's something you get happening 3 times a year where Okafor goes from barely being in the rotation and played 7 minutes last night. You could end up seeing a big game out of him. If I had to play a flat 3K player on DraftKings right now in a tournament, I think it's Jahlil Okafor. But again, not a guy I'm trying to get in there. He'd be number 26 on my value plays right now. But if I had exactly $3,000 left in a GPP, I think it's him right now.
Sounds good. Yeah. So there's a lot to like there in New Orleans. What about the other side of it in Boston? I do think some players stand out a lot more, probably appropriately priced. For me, Kemba stands out a little bit. Marcus Smart, not as appealing as more values opening up there. Same thing can be said for Gordon Hayward. But is anything standing out? Maybe not as much as New Orleans for you on this Boston side.
Not as much as New Orleans. Simply, it's just a math issue. There's all these guys are 6, 7K. Jason Tatum back up to 8K on DraftKings. I rank Tatum and Hayward and Brown and Walker and Smart as A's and GPPs. I don't think Cantor quite got there. He probably would have on FanDuel, believe it or not. I'd have some interest in that at low ownership, and he's only 46 there as opposed to 56 on DraftKings. 56 pretty hard to get to, but this is a pretty sexy matchup. This New Orleans team had improved significantly defensively, having a lot to do with the exceptional play of Derek Favors returning from his injuries and then the bereavement after the loss of his mother. But someone here should throw down some beatings. It's just tougher because all these guys cost basically $7,000, and the production can end up pretty well split between them. And against what's going to be a pretty woeful defensive team, it's tough for me to predict exactly where that's going to come out. On FanDuel, I think my favorite is Jaylen Brown. On DraftKings, I think my favorite is barely Kemba, but they all rank pretty similarly to me as guys who you can probably do better somewhere else in cash, but they're fine if they land on that spot for you. But almost everywhere there's someone I think I can project a little bit better so they don't make it into one lineup. And as tournament players, I have no issue getting to really any of those 5 names, including Marcus Smart. A little more expensive on FanDuel where the scoring system fits his scoring profile a little bit better. A guy who can pick up steals in some sort of quantity. Same thing with Cantor on FanDuel. I'm a bigger fan of, but I like having a Boston player. I think it's a very good idea, especially if you end up running 3 Pelicans. But I wouldn't want more than 2. On FanDuel, I actually have Tatum rank highest. Looking at the pricing distribution there, he's only 6,900 in FanDuel. That's obviously a very nice price. There's some incredible paydown options on FanDuel. So again, I don't think Tatum shows up in one cash or even first UPP lineup, but probably Tatum actually for me on FanDuel now that I relook at it.
Sounds good. Yeah. I would say Kemba stands out as the best for me. And factoring in ownership, almost half the ownership, Tatum at 9%. GPP wise, that looks good when they all do grade out value wise, pretty similar. You good to move on to this next game?
Yes, sir.
Cool. So Chicago and Detroit, it's a 216 over under. Detroit comes in as 4-point favorites. No Wendell Carter Jr. still. You saw Gafford start the last game, played 27 minutes in a not great rebounding spot. Going to have something similar to that here, especially Morris going to be now probable for the Detroit side. Still no Blake there and still no Luke Kennard. So starting on the Chicago side with Gafford starting now, Laurie going to have some backup 5 minutes, but now mainly getting all of his minutes at the 4. Is there interest on that Laurie side for marketing and anything else from Chicago here without Wendell Carter Jr.?
Similar situation sort of to the Boston guys. And again, a lot of site-dependent pricing today, so I don't mean to punt on it too much. Gafford for me is going to come in behind Hayes and some of the other value plays. Last game was an unreasonably poor game for him. And this is actually a fairly strong matchup. Obviously, you can be dealing with individually, he and really anyone else on the Chicago team is giving up a lot of height and weight to Andre Drummond. So it's difficult to look at it as an individually good spot. And the usage, again, like rookie big men, isn't quite there. And there's some foul trouble issues. But I would have some exposure, especially FanDuel at 4,200. I think you're fine to get there. DK at 44 is a little bit less exciting, but I'd have some 5 or 10% Daniel Gafford and feel fine with it. I like Tomas Satoransky a little bit. I would rather play Tomas Satoransky than Bruce Brown, which is a one-on-one that has been posed to me a couple times today. I like the matchup specifically for him. And it's worth looking at when you talk about this matchup. This Chicago defensive backcourt is very, very good. And I spent some time today doing a deep dive looking at Zach LaVine. His defense is better. I have made a punchline out of Zach LaVine's defense too many times this year. And in addition to his increased usage and incredible production over the last couple of weeks, especially, but even the entire year, and where he's really outstripped Markkanen as sort of a pairing we thought we'd be looking at the beginning of the year. His defense has gotten massively better. So to the guy in chat who's been telling me for years and yelling at me on Twitter, feel free to hit me again today, that Zach LaVine is a top 3 shooting guard in the league. He's still not. He's still not close to that designation, but he's much better than he's been, and I'm impressed by his growth this year, really on both ends of the court. But if you look statistically by almost any metric, and if you look at the worst team in the NBA at preventing production from power forward and center, it's the Chicago Bulls. And under a lot of metrics, if you look at the best defensive team in the NBA against guards, it's the Chicago Bulls. They're really good. So there is a bit of sort of a funnel defense thing here when you talk about guys like Bruce Brown or even guys like Derrick Rose, who's starting to, again, similarly to Zach LaVine, outstrip his production a little bit. I would much rather look down on that team and look at Andre Drummond most notably.
Sounds good. Yeah, so Chicago side, I think LaVine, just the 38 minutes over the last 4. He's in a tough price range. Ownership's not following it, though, so 14, 13% tonight. I think it's okay to get to. Price around Ben Simmons, price around guys like Kemba and Lillard. It's not as appealing there, but if you do land on it, I think it's okay. Anything else from the Chicago side?
I think they're priced appropriately. Some Kobe White in tournaments, especially FanDuel, 3,900. You're getting an immediate pivot off a very owned Rajon Rondo. Good spot as any for him to blow up and do his thing. And again, Satoransky, especially on FanDuel, again, I'll give another nod to. But yeah, guys who I think are appropriately owned at the moment. No strong takeaways.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think Satoransky coming in at just slightly under 10% owned right now makes a lot of sense. So on the other side of this, I mean, you're going to have, before we went live, Markieff Morris is going to be probable for this one. So I guess starting there, where do you see that affecting this team? And then also, I'd say the elephant in the room, literally, with size-wise, Andre Drummond, 25% owned currently right now. Now, earlier in the day, I thought it was going to be a difficult decision, or maybe get both of them with LeBron James, and he ends up being out with an illness. They're priced right next to each other. At 10-1, Andre Drummond tonight's looking like one of the better pay-up options out of the few out up there in that range. What do you think about him and this entire front court now of Detroit?
Yeah, I love Drummond. Again, was a little less on him last game. Was again brilliant against the Cavs, and then there was the game before that where he was incredibly underpriced and incredibly underowned against the Cavs, and we spiked that pretty good. Drummond for me, the only super appealing play on this team. The price on Sekou has come up. I still like him, and again, I'm looking to target members of this front court here, but the return of Markieff Morris is going to make his production questionable. It's going to make Christian Wood, who I probably would retake entirely out of the rankings at this point. They have already been moving away from him a lot, playing Thon McCurr through the fourth quarter instead of playing him. Even harder for him to get there now. So really hard for me to fire that Christian Wood bullet that I normally like to recommend because he can bust, a slate in 18 minutes. But Markieff coming back makes Sekou a little dicey. I mentioned my admiration, if you will, for the Bulls' backcourt defense. That makes it hard to get to Bruce Brown. Not that I dislike Bruce Brown. 5,300 on FanDuel. That's a really good price. Still under 6K on DraftKings. I like Bruce Brown a lot. And the continued absence of obviously Blake, but Reggie Jackson and Luke Kennard, he's going to get time. He just doesn't quite make it there today when his price is that close to Lonzo, and I prefer Sato for 300 less, I think, on both sites. You can play Svi Mikhailuk. We had a thing 2 days ago. He was like chalky guy, and I dumped all over him because I was pointing out, like, for him to be good, he needs to get his career high in that game. Spoiler alert: 6 was not his career high. He did not get there with 6 in that last game. But I'd rather play him today than I would have on Thursday because he's going to have gone from 30% owned to 3. I don't mind the bullet at 3. Like, he's literally going to get 3% owned from 30, and not that different of a situation. So I'd play Andre Drummond be my first guy. My second guy in a tournament, I don't know. Sekou, Svi, and Derek would all be the same for me. I like Derek Rose a lot, but again, matchup I discussed a little bit. I guess Derek has to be my number 2 for me. There's still just the upside there. You can still get 50 at him, but I do think they are intentionally, they're aware of the minutes. I don't think he's going to play 30 plus minutes every game going forward. Could be wrong, but that seems an odd decision from then. And again, 5K, 6K. Now you're looking at 7 plus even on DraftKings. Derrick Rose, I think, was just better point per dollar options. And again, I have matchup concerns. So Drummond for me, and then a whole lot of
Yeah, I'm the same way. Rose is slightly a second. The minutes are coming up, but I still don't even feel confident projecting him for 30, even though you've seen it in a couple games now. At 30, he still just grades out as an okay play on this slate for me, with a nice ceiling on him, though. So moving forward into the game now, with waiting for this news on Anthony Davis. Lakers in OKC, 214 over under. OKC now jumps out to an 8.5 point favorite without LeBron, potentially without AD, and also no Danny Green in this one. So a really big defensive hit for this Lakers team, as well as the offensive side. So just starting on the Lakers side, obviously no LeBron, no Danny Green. And the big one here, Anthony Davis. What are you thinking in terms of Davis playing? Do you have a read on that at all? And how do you think it's going to affect this team one way or the other?
Yeah, I know one person who works for the Lakers. He had no read, so I have no read, but I made a call, which is fun. I have no guess whatsoever. You would think he would like to try and play because LeBron is going to be out. This is only the second game this year LeBron has missed. He missed a Nuggets game, and the Nuggets absolutely beat the crap out of them. Yeah, so obviously a lot to touch on here, and I'd certainly like to get your reads, but the absence of Danny Green is going to end up being a solidifying minutes factor for both Avery Bradley and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who make interesting value plays. Neither super ceiling guys, but between the two, I would rather play KCP to Avery Bradley, and I would have some ownership on both of those guys. I think it's a very good idea. On FanDuel, there's lots of great power forward options. I think you can get to at cheaper prices, so I'm fine if you want to run some Anthony Davis, but the risk there is obvious. But $9,800 Anthony Davis without LeBron on DraftKings is pretty sexy, so just make sure you have a plan, and not enough people will switch. We've seen one consistent thing this year, and it's that not enough people late swap to plays. If that game was the early play, and we found out 10 minutes before 7, if it was a 7 o'clock game, that Anthony Davis was in, he would sprout up to like 40% owned. If it's an 8 o'clock game, which it is, and we find out it's 7:50 in the exact same matchup, he's going to end up being 16% owned. So be part of that 16%, because over the long term, that's a huge moneymaker. Kuzma is great no matter what. He's probably a little too and again, I'm a massive critic of Kyle Kuzma. He has a very mellow light game where his defense isn't good. You very rarely get defensive stats. He's going to go out there, put up some points, a few rebounds, and not a whole hell of a lot else. So he needs either great volume or great efficiency to be valuable. But spoiler alert, no LeBron, you're going to get great volume. Last game with no Anthony Davis, you had Kuzma take, I forget, 23 shots, give or take a shot or so. DK still looks pretty good at 5,400. I don't know what we have him projected at, but I imagine I'd be targeting somewhere in the 20% range right now. And FanDuel is $4,100.
Kuzma's right now at 6, but that hasn't been updated for about 45 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'd want more than that.
The recent update. Hold on. Wait, no, never mind. I think that's projections. Let me check ownership.
FanDuel, I imagine he's like 50, and I'd have more. Just $4,100. I think you can very reasonably project him for shots into the 20s again. That's gonna be hard to get away from.
Yeah, so. I'm pulling it up right now. I agree, and then also, I mean, in that range too. And if you're looking either on either side right now, it's really hard. You mentioned at the top of the show, just top one, if not definitely in the top 3 values right now, and just Rajon Rondo. And just if you want to discuss honestly what makes him as good of a play outside of LeBron being out and that price point, how hard is it to get away from him? How much of Rondo would be too much tonight as a guy coming in right now in the latest run at close to 60% ownership on a 6-game slate?
60, we're getting into it. Well, all right, so here's sort of everything on Rondo. The one game that LeBron did sit out this year, again, the Denver game, and they got smoked, but Rondo started that game, played the second most minutes, and would have played even more. I think he played 27 or 28 minutes in that game. The only person who got on top of that was Brow, who played something like 33. In that game, Rondo was going to play 30-something minutes. If this game stays close, I think Rondo is going to play 30-something minutes. He's the primary facilitator for this team. He's still a very good fantasy basketball player. He still makes roughly a fantasy point a minute. So the matchup is average to, it's very close to average if you look at it. So it's very reasonable projection for Rondo to say, 34 minutes and 34 fantasy points, and he costs less than $4,000. He projects for like a 9x. That's really hard to get away from. I could talk about it more, but that's really what it comes into. They need someone to run the offense. That's going to be him more often than not. Although it's worth pointing out that does add a little bit to the upsides of KCP and Avery Bradley, and those are guys who can at least bring the ball up the court. But yeah. So downsides, it's Rajon Rondo, who can be incredibly flaky. I don't know if this game is on nationwide broadcast television. That's something we should look into, because that's a real thing with Rondo. I know we all hate narratives, but that's proven out over about a decade. So at a certain point, I think you have to realize that it seems to be a bit of a thing. Could get in a spitting match with Chris Paul again.
Uh-oh.
Was that just for the spitting match, or did something?
Yeah, it is. But okay. I think this game tonight, I think, is just on NBA TV, so no prime time.
Etuan Moore is starting.
Etuan Moore starting at the 2.
Yeah.
Does that change anything for you?
Makes me like Etuan a little bit more. I would still rather play Alexander Walker. This was probably the most likely lineup consideration now that I take a look at it. I didn't project the starters for this game, but doesn't change a ton for me. I mean, again, they had to give these guys a pile of time. You had to look at something like 100 minutes for Moore, Hart, and Walker. So this was probably the most likely thing. They'll leave Walker in that second unit, but I expect even more time to come out there for him. You probably get Frank Jackson entering back in and picking up a few of those minutes, but no, I would still rank them on both sides: Alexander Walker, Hart, Moore, but make sure you have some Etuan Moore.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so Rondo, again, just coming in a touch under 60%. Kyle Kuzma is 20% on FanDuel, 6% on DraftKings.
20% on FanDuel is absurd. He's $4,100 on FanDuel. I think I have him projected for 34 fantasy points.
Yeah, and that's a recent run. That's a recent run as of 10, 15 minutes ago, 19.7% ownership on FanDuel.
Okay, well, I'd have well more than that. I'm going to take a look at FanDuel power forwards, and, I recall there being some excellent options. Let me see here. Tatum at 69. We talked about that. I like Horford a lot. Who are they playing at power forward? Brow, we don't know if he's playing. I like Tatum. I like Horford. They're fine. I really wonder where our power forward ownership is going to. Gafford's fine. I am projected for like 11 fewer fantasy points than Kuzma, who costs $100 less. Jeremy Grant.
Is Laurie power forward eligible?
Yes, he is. And I like Laurie you
Yeah,
know,
he's coming in
just
around 30% right now. Third highest player owned on FanDuel.
wow. I mean, I like
Yeah, number
Laurie.
4 is Horford right there at 28%.
Okay, I like Laurie quite a bit at 5,700, but I haven't projected 3.5 fantasy points higher than Kuzma, who is $1,600 less. So I will posit that that number is low on Kuzma. I would be surprised to see it not start with at least a 3, but I'd still probably have more than that. I just really can't get away from that. It's while it's not a giant slate, there's a lot of great plays and there is plenty of money to spend up on. I mean, the FanDuel placeholder I'm looking at in front of me has no Rondo and no Hayes in it. It has Alexander Walker, but it has Doncic and Drummond and Ball in those spots right now.
That makes sense. We have some Lakers news. AD still a game time decision, but Rondo and KCP are going to start in place of LeBron and Danny Green, which I think makes sense there.
Yeah, makes me feel. I mean, that's what should be expected. So not really huge news, but yeah, they'll start. Yeah, that's as expected. Little nervous. Let's talk about the Thunder.
Yeah, on the Thunder side of this, you're going to just have no Nerlens Noel in this one. So I guess the biggest question mark for a couple of days now is in content, at least, is what's happening with Steven Adams. He had the 35 minutes against Philadelphia. A lot of that, at least I think, was just matching Joel Embiid while he was on the court for the most part. Then he had an OT game against Brooklyn, saw a similar run. And then the blowout against Houston, where he did play 16 first half minutes, a little over 16. So what are you expecting out of Steven Adams on a slate where you have Drummond, you have some more guys we'll talk about, and also Hayes as a value center? Is it something that you're interested in? Is it appealing at all in this type of a slate?
Yeah, I mean, I think you should still certainly be interested in him. DraftKings did something that they've done a poor job of largely this year, and that's pricing guys down reasonably significantly against the Lakers. Now, we're going to get a Lakers where they take off LeBron and take off Danny Green and throw on Rajon Rondo, and all of a sudden, this is a much juicier spot. So it's sort of pointing out a little bit on both sides, but specifically on DraftKings, these guys are too cheap. It's not consistent. Like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander probably ends up being my favorite guard on FanDuel, where I think he's 62, and everyone else is where he's randomly cheaper, whereas everyone else is significantly more expensive on FanDuel. Chris Paul is 76 as opposed to 68, and Dennis Schroeder is I think 5'5" and 5'6". Those numbers are too cheap for a guy who gets the amount of time he does and throws up some buckets. So I like Dennis Schroeder more than a couple other guys in that range. I'm a little bit behind Kuzma. I'm a little bit ahead of Melo, for example. I like getting to some Dennis Schroeder in that price in this spot now with this Lakers team that defensively is not going to be everything they have been. We have a lot of good defensive teams today that are going to be playing not quite so well defensively between them and the 76ers, and there's going to be some adjustments that need to be done on the fly.
Yeah, I agree. This team, for the most part, they all grade out pretty well for me. Schroeder, Adams, Paul, SGA, they're all right there. None of them really standing out as priorities for me. Schroeder at that price point, I probably get to the most. Moving on to this next game here with Cleveland and Denver, 217.5 total. Denver's 12.5 point favorites. You have a spot where there's still no Kevin Porter Jr., no Exum. Larry Nance is still going to be out here. So Cleveland, you get huge minutes out of these starters, and you saw huge minutes the last game, went to overtime. Tristan Thompson playing 40 plus, loved close to that at 38. And Sexton, Garland, Osman, they're all pretty much playing 34, 35 minutes a game at this point. Even with them playing these huge minutes, with all the value on the slate, I don't find myself getting there as much. Is it different for you?
No. This is the rare team that got no A's in my rankings in either cash or tournaments.
Yeah.
If you end up playing no one on Cleveland, I would not feel bad about it. $7,200 Kevin Love is absolutely a place you can get to. I do like the matchup more without Millsap. I'm fine to see him show up in your tournament lineup. He scored a B. That's just fine for me. Tristan Thompson at his current price is not someone I'm getting to on a slate that's juicy. We just got the massive game out of him. I don't think you see more than one of them a year, and I think it's unlikely you catch them back to back. Not a great matchup for him. I'm not a super fan of that. Colin Sexton, again, another guy, points, not a whole hell of a lot else, so you need sort of weird things to go on. And again, these guys on the road in Denver, it's just a nightmarish environment. So I don't want to spend $5K on Darius Garland. I don't want to spend $6K on Colin Sexton. Don't really want to spend $7K on Kevin Love or Tristan Thompson, but I would probably chase the upside. And so Love would be my first man into a tournament lineup on this team. But after that, it's Brandon Knight probably would be my second guy into a team just because he's so cheap. And if I have to play someone I don't want to play, I'll spend less.
Yeah, you're getting those stable 23, 24 minutes off the bench since Knight's been there backing up. The starter's just playing huge minutes, so it doesn't open up much more. They re-signed McKinney, but he's not doing much for his 10, 12, 14 minutes a game. Yeah,
Yep.
right now, Love's the only one I have even in a player pool. I think just the ceiling on him makes him more appealing in those tournaments. On the other side, Denver, no Millsap. Barton's going to be probable off the injury report in this one. So Jokic is 9,700. Hard for me to get there with Drummond really close in the value at center that we have, at least in the DraftKings format. With no Millsap, it is once again a little bit better of a spot for Jokic, and you have now a Grant priced up, so it's not as appealing. Is anything standing out for you on the Denver side? For me personally, I'm getting to some Murray. Outside of that, some value in Harris. It's gone away as the day has gone on. Not else more though for me.
Yeah, it's about how I feel about it. You're dealing with a team that can still run kind of deep. I don't mind getting to some of the bench pieces. Boss man himself, Alex Baker, put out a meaningful tweet today about the possibility that they do start Mason Plumlee here. That would not surprise me. I still think I would, if you uh, force me to make a guess now, I would say Jeremy Grant. I think more likely starts, especially given the nature of the matchup, and Plumlee has a reasonable shot. This, alongside the Celtics, the two games most likely to catch a blowout today. But there's a chance Mason Plumlee starts. And regardless, he's in play for me at 3,800, gets to play in a blowout, gets to play in the second unit. Someone I'd want to have a couple shares of. You can fire bullets at anyone who plays in the blowout sort of second unit. So I would have a non-zero amount of Monty Morris. I'd have a non-zero amount of Michael Porter Jr. But yeah, Barton, we presume back. I haven't heard specific news, but not on the injury report. Gary Harris, always unexciting value. And with all the other value opening up, it's tough to play Harris over Hart, Alexander Walker, Rondo, etc. when you're thinking I want to spike an upside. But it is Cleveland. I have some amount of Gary Harris. And I do think Cleveland most susceptible to point guard spike games if you're going to get them both. The Sexland backcourt in Cleveland, known to give up some fairly decent guard games, similar vein to Charlotte and Memphis, where that's the most likely place to spike tournament winning lines against this team. It's a little harder to do so when you're dealing with, Love and Tristan Thompson than when you're dealing with a couple of kids in the backcourt. So I think Murray, again, I would be with you, would be my first place. Then past that, Jokic, it's worth pointing out, FanDuel is 1,500, I think, cheaper than Drummond on DraftKings. It's 400. So there's a pretty significant difference when you make that play on DraftKings. I'm guessing the ownership's going to be somewhere around, I don't know, 30 for Drummond and 15, 17 for Jokic. That's probably about where that should be. On FanDuel, that's going to even out a little bit more. It's going to be interesting with that significant pricing disparity. But again, not a team you have to get any part of.
Yeah. But right now you're having Murray come in at 11% on DraftKings, Jokic 13% on DraftKings, and he's coming in closer to 20% on FanDuel, which makes sense because of the price difference there. This game, probably the least appealing game on the slate for me. Just Cleveland, like we said, Love stands out a little bit. The Denver side for me, it's Murray. The whole game, Murray in Love, and maybe some Jokic, especially on FanDuel. But outside of that, not much that I want to look at here. Anything else from you?
No, I like the other 5 games really significant in this one. As you mentioned, unexciting. You just have all the uncertainty of poor pace and possible blowout, and it just seems like a sort of a tough space to get to.
Yeah, and so Philly and Dallas, still no Embiid here. That's the major news from their side of the ball. Philadelphia. From Dallas' side, just still no Porzingis, and I believe that is all the news that we're looking at there. So no Embiid. We saw it in the last game. First quarter, I think he had like first 11 out of 12 or 15 points. Josh Richardson ended up scoring more so in the fourth quarter. Then went cold for a little while in between. You had a 9K Ben Simmons price point drop. You have price points coming up on Richardson from that good game, as well as Horford. I find myself becoming more appealed to Simmons' price point dropping, Harris's price point dropping, and I think it just naturally makes sense. Ownership's following that as well. What are you liking on this Philadelphia side without Embiid, and do you think you're going to get the same rotation here? I don't think we've seen a lineup yet. I'm checking now with Mike Scott starting at the 4.
I don't know. I had a good feeling that Mike Scott would start against the Celtics, and that came to pass. I can see them going a couple ways here, but anytime you're dealing with Dallas, that there's just sort of more stuff up in the air because it's a lot harder to predict what they're going to do. So I think Scott is the most likely option simply because it covers a lot of eventualities for them, but I don't have a strong feel for that whatsoever. Much like last slate on Thursday, I had Richardson and Horford as my top 2 76ers on that slate, and that worked extremely well. It's really tough for me at this point looking at these 4 guys at their current prices. Everyone's Price has come down even more, almost without exception. Horford raised a little bit a couple places, but Simmons has come down 300 on FanDuel and 500 on DraftKings. Yeah, I'm still a big fan of that number, and if you extend your queries a little longer than the limited time frame this year, if you look back over the last couple of years, you'll find that the bonuses for Simmons are a little more prevalent without Horford. So I long way around of me saying that without Embiid, rather, I still do think is very relevant for Simmons. And $8,200 or $8,500 Simmons is still someone I have a lot of appeal for. The significant price range on Josh Richardson is probably enough. I have them tightly enough ranked that it probably moves him from my favorite to my least favorite guy on DraftKings, as weird as that is. But I would probably barely at this point rank them Horford, Harris, Simmons, Richardson, with not a lot of distribution between those four guys. But I like them quite a bit. There is all these other externalities we're talking about. I like the matchup with Dallas quite a bit, and removing Embiid is just a massive cookie for this team.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, I have the exact same ranking there. And for me, Horford and Harris, in terms of like the value, both coming in as like a 5.2 type of value. Simmons drops off a little bit more, but I like the minutes you're getting out of him lately, and also just price drop. For people watching, you have Simmons at 17% on DraftKings. Harris is coming in around 24%, leading the team. And then it drops off pretty much Horford around 15, and you have Richardson around 10. I'm really not getting much Richardson.
That feels I slightly like Horford the most out of those numbers. But again, it's all within a very narrow band. But I think it's worth pointing out for me, I do like them all a little bit more than the commensurate Celtics.
Yep.
Like you would end up with a team where it's like, all right, 4 guys I really like, 5 if you want to add Smart on that team, but 4 starting guys I have a lot of appeal for, all priced around the 6s. I do feel that the benefits for the 76ers, Suns, and Embiid are a little more palpable, and the minutes feel a little safer, and the likelihood of a blowout is less. So in general, a little more excited to play my first Sixer or second Sixer than my first Celtic or second Celtic.
I think that makes sense. And on the opposite side of this, you have Luka. I think it's really just the two-site difference here. Luka on DraftKings with no LeBron, potentially Davis's status up in the air. If you want to just pay up for the pure points upside there on a 6-game slate, it's becoming more appealing to me, but still hard to get to that price point. Easier to get there a little bit on FanDuel. Nothing else for me, and also in the ownership, stands out at all from this Dallas team. Is anything else outside of Luka, and do you have interest in him on FanDuel and also on DraftKings?
I have a lot. Well, it's really, again, going to end up being a site-by-site thing. He's incredibly expensive everywhere except for FanDuel, where he takes up a point guard spot. And that's sticky because at point guard, I like Eric Bledsoe we're going to eventually get to. That's just a little bit too cheap, and my guy's been getting his time recently. Chris Paul's up at 7,600, so he's like 6th on this list, but $8,500 Damian Lillard. $8,200 Ben Simmons, $6,900 Jamal Murray, $6,100 Lonzo Ball, $5,000 Tomas Satoransky, and of course 38 or 39, I forget which one is there, Rajon Rondo. There are really good point guard plays there. So not only are you spending a significant amount of money against a Philadelphia team that is still an excellent defense, you're also giving up a better point per dollar play, if not 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. So that's tough. I have him as my highest projected player. I'm not going to speak. I don't know. What do you have him for? Just like sort of production. What do you expect to get out of Luka Doncic today?
I have Luka. So I have Luka projected for 63.2.
I'm at 64.4. So right, like that's really nice. But you are also making some other choices. So I think I'm fine with whatever you get to. If you told me you have 50% Luka, I'd be like, all right, I think you're making a stand. I hope you get 75, not 65 for you. It's not a great spot, but there's no Kristaps, and like he's gonna do everything for this team. If you told me you don't have a lot, I'd be like, that's fine. There's a million brilliant other plays, and the number he puts up to really hurt you has to start with a 7. So okay, so I don't end up with a strong Luka take. Like it's on both sides, there are compelling arguments to take you away. The one on DraftKings more fiscal, and the one on FanDuel being more just positional scarcity.
Yeah, and like I prefer Drummond. I prefer Giannis right now. He's coming in 13% on DraftKings. I have 15%. Just with all the value opening up, it made it a little bit easier to get there. But yeah, the price is still, you are prioritizing a 70-plus point night at that point. Are you good on Dallas? Is there anything else that stands out?
I can talk a little bit about some of the edge plays, like Tim Hardaway Jr. on FanDuel at 41. I can see getting there, but the problem is a lot of their other good value are guards who now end up playing a lot of time alongside Luca, and that just sort of squashes all the value. And then there's the bigs who used to be 4K and I had a lot of interest in, Powell and Kleber, and now they're 4.5, 5K. So not a ton of interest in anyone else. It's Luca, Tim Hardaway on FanDuel. I think $4,100 does get a noticeable shout out. I can see that working out, but yeah, nothing else, and we're running out of time. So ready to move.
Yep. Yeah. Last game here. So Milwaukee and Portland, 228.5 over under. Milwaukee 6-point favorite. So hopefully a game that actually stays close for them, get full run. Milwaukee side, it's just Korver out. Ersan is going to be in, as well as Wesley Matthews. Portland, Hazonia is questionable. And then a big one, Whiteside is going to be questionable. And they're seeming like a game time decision here. So Milwaukee side, for me, Giannis stands out as a great play, as well as Bledsoe. Bledsoe getting those minutes now on both sites. It's standing out, 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy this year. Those are the two that I'm getting to the most, and really that's it there on Milwaukee. What about for you?
Yeah, Giannis, Bledsoe, I agree with that entirely. Again, it's been said a million times, so it should be said again. Giannis is always a minutes issue. You want him to have to close a game, and this is actually a pretty thin line for a Bucks team that beats the crap out of everyone. They're like 5.5 or 6-point favorites in Portland, so very real chance you get 34 minutes out of Giannis instead of 29, and that's a really relevant difference. He's just a beast, and they have absolutely nobody there who's going to stop him. So I would agree, Giannis, Bledsoe, both sites. Middleton, less egregiously priced on FanDuel, where he's only 66. I think he's 75 on DraftKings. So don't mind getting to Middleton there. I'm still a pretty big fan of that, but definitely that's my 1 and 2. Past that, you're looking at value options that, like, I like George Hill. I like $4,000 George Hill. Hard for me to take that in a world of the Pelicans guys and Rondo and so on and so forth. So no, I'm fine sticking that. But it should be, pointed out, I think this is the highest over-under game on the slate, and the line is close. And I do think these guys, just because there's no sort of drama and injury and Lakers and Rondo and spitting and Celtics and Pellies and all that crap going on, will be a little lower owned than they should be. So I like, making a strong commitment to Bledsoe and Giannis.
Yeah, and I mean, you pointed out right now you only have Giannis at 15%, Bledsoe at 12% on this type of a slate, and I think it's really a slate with all the value. If you wanted to get those two studs in like a Giannis and a Drummond on this slate, it makes a lot of sense. On the other side of it, Portland Whiteside, like we said, is questionable here. I actually really like the price that you're getting on Damian Lillard tonight at $8,600. You're just getting consistent 36, probably 37, 38 minutes a game. Same thing for McCollum, just not as appealing. So for me, Lillard stands out. Whiteside, if he's in there, I have a harder time getting to, but I think he's fine. And the big one that's a question mark for me, I really want to hear your take on this, is Carmelo Anthony, 5,600. Cheapest price you've seen him at least in the new year, 2020. Cheapest he's been in a little while now. So what is your stance on this Portland side? What do you think about Whiteside's status? And really, Melo is a big question mark that I have on this slate.
Yeah, I have no strong take on Whiteside. Again, respiratory infection, questionable second straight game. Last game they played, they were horrible and got crushed by the Timberwolves. Just never a good sign for your franchise. But looked really good. He had, I want to say, 15 and 14 in 27 minutes. So looked fine. If he's playing again, as I said at the lead of the show, he'll be lesser owned than he should be. He should be on this slate at that price, 9% owned. Because of the questionable stuff, if he comes in close to lock, he'll be 3% owned. So I'm fine getting to some Whiteside in the event he starts, but understand points per dollar, he's not going to fare as well as either Jokic or Drummond, certainly. And secondarily, there's obviously some risk with an upper respiratory infection. They limit him a little, or that he's just not tip-top shape. And again, everyone else is in for this team. We saw this game already this year. This is the run back. This is actually the fourth time for the Pistons and Bulls, last time they played this year. But we saw this game once already, and there was no Whiteside and no Lillard. And McCollum went the hell off. And in a game with no Whiteside and no Lillard against these Bucks that ended up like 135 to 129 or something like that. They scored 260 points or something. Melo wasn't quite good enough. I've been fairly critical of Melo since he came back. Had that one very good game there, but it's hard for me to project him for much more than like high 20s in fantasy points. I think you can make an argument for him cusping towards 30 in this scenario, and you need things to really work out for him to hit a ceiling. And when you have fully healthy Lillard and McCollum out there, dicey. Again, we played this game in November, and he was just with the team and played 30 minutes with no Lillard, no Whiteside. So you had, I think, Tolliver, Trent, and Hood started in that game. So lots of low usage guys there, and you got maybe 30 fantasy points out of Melo, but he had a particularly non-exciting game. He just doesn't do enough for me. So you will get games like the Toronto game where he shoots 65% from the field and gets, 40 fantasy points in this nice pace. I don't know, like he prices in. The most important thing is always price. $5,600 is objectively too cheap for Carmelo Anthony. I have to agree with that, but there's a lot of guys I really like today, and there's just so many ways Melo doesn't get there. One being he does not do a lot most days other than score and get you 6 rebounds or whatever. So you need lots of volume or lots of efficiency. I have no reason to expect this to be overly efficient or overly voluminous for him today. So there's just other guys I would rather take that shot at, but he is well too cheap. I have no issue with any amount of Melo you showed me. He's probably going to get 18 points, 7 rebounds, an assist, and a steal or a block and give you 29 fantasy points, which at 56 is not going to fuss you too much. I would just rather look at other guys. With him being as popular as I imagine he's like 20% owned. I don't really have a lot of interest in playing next to Lillard, McCollum, 20% owned Melo. Like, I think he should be like 12, 13.
Yeah, he's coming in at 14%. I'm projected for 29.
Bad.
Yeah, the thing you need is the volume. Like he's had games where he's seen 10 shots as of late and more often as of late, and that's not going to cut it when you need 15, 16 shots out of him. So we have about 5 minutes until lock, a little bit less. Do you want to hit on some fire questions or any last second?
Let's get whatever they throw at us. Yeah, looking at that game, it was 130. Someone sent me the link. Thank you. 137 to 129. The Bucks won at home. Again, that was the Giants Scalabrine game. Where Scalabrine had 50 fantasy points in a game because Whiteside was out there. And in that game, Melo played 29 minutes, shot 6 for 15 for 18 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. So had 33 fantasy points. That was fine. But that was with no Lillard, no Whiteside, and with Tolliver, Hood, and Trent all playing 30 minutes and taking single-digit shots. So it can happen. It happened against the Raptors. It can absolutely happen against the Bucks. But there's just so many other guys I would rather go to. But 14% is a much more tolerable number. So I'm pretty ambivalent on Melo. It's just very unlikely you're going to see the 50 burgers out of him.
Sounds good. We have a question. Kuzma or Grant? Jeremy Grant.
Kuzma.
DeLon Wright versus Josh Hart, straight up.
Josh Hart. Both of those not terribly close for me, by the way.
I agree. Damian Lillard or Ben Simmons? I'll let you answer. It's FD cash for specific.
Cash makes that a little more interesting. I'll take Ben Simmons. In tournaments, I probably take Lillard. Like that's very interesting to me. But in cash, I'm probably going to take Simmons, and also FanDuel. Simmons can rack up a few more steals and stuff. That probably tilts it that way for me just a hair.
Yep, I'm there with you. Horford or Markkanen in cash? I'm just going to assume DK on that one.
Either way, it'd be Horford for me in cash. I think Markkanen in tournaments makes a little more sense. You have minutes upside, shot upside, other things get there, but Horford does a lot. For his 6,500, he's probably going to get you your 30.
This one's really interesting, but it depends. So, JaVale McGee or Jackson Hayes?
Yeah. So, this has got to be a DraftKings question. So, as of right now, I play Jackson Hayes because I think Anthony Davis has a decent chance of playing. And if Anthony Davis plays JaVale McGee, I mean, last game was a weird one where he got 5 fouls in 18 minutes and Howard got 5 fouls in 10 minutes. So you got 20 minutes of Jared Dudley at center. Yep. That's not going to happen most often. But if Anthony Davis plays, you're still looking at somewhere 18, 20 minutes of JaVale, which makes him absolutely fine at $4,100. So if Davis is out, the answer is JaVale McGee, not close. Not enough people will go there. Just play JaVale McGee.
Yep.
Right now, it ends up being close. On FanDuel, they're not priced nearly the same. I think JaVale is a well higher. I could be wrong. But yeah, I mean, Jackson Hayes is your safer play. I'm fine anywhere pivoting to JaVale McGee because even in 17 minutes, can randomly spike this for you, and Jackson Hayes is going to be really significantly owned. So,
yeah, I think we have less than a minute. But Giannis and Hayes or Horford and Dame on DK cash?
Giannis and Hayes or Horford and Dame on DK cash.
Coming down to the buzzer.
Giannis and Hayes, but that's incredibly close. But I'll take Giannis and Hayes.
I agree. I don't know if we'll get this one in, but Hart or Kuzma, I'm going to go Hart there.
I will take Hart as well there.
And Levine and Kuzma or CP3 and Horford for cash on DK?
Cash would be CP3 and Horford.
Fair enough. Avery Bradley or Alexander Walker? I'll go Walker there pretty easily.
I'll go Alexander Walker pretty easily, yeah.
Luka, Giannis, this is like a 6v6. I don't know if I can get that in.
We're 4 seconds from lock, so you can go ahead and do it, but if anyone's playing at 7 o'clock, it will be moot.
Yeah, there are. So it was Luka, Giannis, Rondo, Harris, Ingram, Rondo, Lillard, Drummond. I like the second one.
One more time, I'll take a shot at it.
I'm assuming it's Gary Harris, but I don't know what the rest of his lineup is.
There's
But
Tobias too.
yeah, that's the thing. So Luka, Giannis, Rondo, and Harris, or Ingram, Rondo. So the same there with Rondo.
They're both. So Luka. Sorry, let's back it up then. Luka, Harris, and who in the first one? Just
yeah, I just realized that. Luka, Giannis, and Harris versus Ingram, Lillard, and Drummond. I'm assuming that's Gary.
It is Tobias, I think.
Is it?
Well, the first one was Luka. All right.
Versus Ingram, which is like 4.3K on DK difference.
4 exactly.
Yeah.
8-4 and 12-4. So there's a 4K difference there. It's fun. This is like a word problem.
I know, right? And then it's Giannis versus Drummond, which is 1,000, right?
Which is about 1,000.
And
so
then,
that, yeah.
And then Lillard versus Harris.
So yes, it's Gary Harris. You're right. Okay. And that was cash or tournaments?
Not signified. I will guess tournaments, but not said.
I think I would probably end up on the first one.
Fair enough. All right, I'm gonna pull this ownership for my first attempt at this. You down for this?
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a fun daddy like. Are there 2 7:00 games?
Yeah,
I want to. No, there's 2 at 7 because there was the 5:00 game is already.
Yeah, exactly. I think I saw PJ Tucker ended up getting hurt in that one.
Yeah. Although I think I saw he was likely to return. They said it was just a stinger.
Yeah, those like 5:00 showdown slates. I mean, I never played the NBA showdowns, but whenever there's like multiple different news coming in the last hour, I usually do. So with no Capella and I think it was McLemore ended up drawing a start, just enough to like make it appealing.
Yeah.
All right. We have the ownership.
You have the ownership. All right,
yeah,
I'm kicking back.
All right. So we have 2 games. Let's see how we can do this. Okay. We end up having 5 players above 20%.
Okay, so we have 2 games. We have obviously the Celtics and we have the Celtics and Pelicans and the Bulls and the Pistons.
Correct.
Okay. 5 guys over 20.
And 1 guy is very close to 20.
Okay. I doubt I'll be able to pick him out specifically among the 6, but I will give a shot to do so. Your 5 guys over 20 are Ingram, Drummond, Hayes, Alexander Walker. Those 4, I'm sure. Ingram, Drummond, Hayes, Alexander Walker.
Those 4 are correct. I'll give you a hint. This last one who is over 20 is also over 30%.
That didn't help. It's probably Josh Hart. I'm feeling like I'm missing someone from the Bulls game. But
yeah, it's Josh Hart. Those are the 5. Do you want to take a crack at ranking them?
Okay, so it was Drummond, Hayes, Alexander Walker, Hart, and Ingram. Do I want to take a crack at ranking them? They're all over 20. You're saying
they're over 30 too.
Over 30. Okay, I was just saying they should have a lot of ownership. I'll say Hayes is number 1.
Number 1 is Drummond at 51.8%. Hayes comes in number 2 at 44.8.
Wow. That's a lot of Drummond in people's lives. Like, he's been transcendent. There's nothing, I mean, I didn't go into it a lot because we had limited time, but yeah, it's a brilliant spot. Like I mentioned the front court numbers with Chicago and I guess I talked about it a little and the size differential and everything, but that's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how much people get to on FanDuel, where it's a little tougher to get there. And so then you had Hayes number 2, so you have Hart, Alexander Walker, and Ingram. Yeah, they're all really good.
Yeah, they're all 3 of those guys they're right next to each other. They're all pretty much 34%.
Oh, okay. Then
like the exact
whatever.
Same, 34.
Yeah, but all 3 Pellies, they all feel really good. It feels like having. I mean, that is, and again, I have a feeling I'm going to like Lonzo even more after these numbers because you're now telling me that there are 4 Pellies at 34% owned or higher.
Yeah,
which is good. I really like the Pelicans, but that means that Lonzo is at most close to 20. I'm guessing he's the guy who's close to 20.
He is not. Levine is 18.6%. That is
I disagree with that. I'm a big Zach Levine fan. Yeah. Again, I have a Zach Levine record I'm very proud of, but I don't know, 86 or 83. I'm trying to get his FanDuel and his DK prices separate in my head, but that's a real number. I like him quite a bit, but just 20%. Like he doesn't. I don't know. Just all these other players we're talking about are priced a little better, and he's priced similarly. Say Brandon Ingram, who I have at like 5 points more. So I guess I just he's been seeing tons of minutes and has been very productive. So I get getting there. It's just good DFS theory. I don't like to play players when they're at the top of their price range and popular. But
yeah,
he's doing really well, and the matchup is good. So I can't complain about too much. So, okay, I hope we're going to hit Lonzo at some point. Because
Lonzo's next up here. Do you want to try and take a crack at it? So less than 18% for sure then.
15.
Yeah, he comes in at 14.1%. Lonzo Ball, 7th highest on the first 2 games so far.
Yeah. So I would probably He'd probably be my favorite Pelican. If you're telling me if you gave me the ownership and said start building your lineup, I'd probably put Lonzo in first. It'd be close. I still really like Brandon Ingram. I still really like Alexander Walker. I still really like Hart too. So yeah, all 4 of those guys still feel great. If Jackson Hayes is the highest and he was whatever you said, 45, 46 or whatever, that's probably the one I'm trying to get away from here. As I mentioned, there's a couple ways that again he costs so little. That's why all these guys are good, but there's more ways that can fail I can see in my head. So I guess that's the guy I'm first trying to get away from here. But yeah, they all feel great. And Lonzo, whatever you said, 13, 14 feels pretty good.
Yeah, 14. It makes sense now. Like I saw somebody ask after the fact, how many Pelicans is too much? It seems like a lot of people are playing 2 to 4 and probably a good amount playing 4 than usual. You have, I mean, even Antoine Moore is right after that at 13.9%. You don't even, it's crazy because we mentioned it, just all the value right there. You don't even start getting into these Boston guys. Kemba comes in at 12%, and then everything else on the slate is below 10%. Gordon Hayward, and it's just all the Boston guys after that. Gordon Hayward's 8.9, Jaylen Brown 8, Marcus Smart 7.8. Does any of those stand out to you?
I like those all. Again, the DK prices change things a little bit. Like, the Tatum price is it's really hard to play 8K Jason Tatum when you have, top of my head, Brandon Ingram and Zach LaVine and Ben Simmons and all these other guys really not that far away. So we didn't even get there yet, but no, that all feels about great. They're maybe a little low against the Pelicans. Like I liked getting to one Celtic, but it was really hard for me to have a strong take. And I think you said Kemba was 11 or 12 or whatever. That feels about right. The other ones are coming in the high singles. No, that's
Yeah, the rest of these guys, I mean, you have Laurie and Satoransky both at 6% each. I like both of those numbers. And those are the first Bulls right after.
Where's Svi Mikhailiuk?
He's at 1.6% ownership. That's your guy.
Go.
Yeah.
I don't particularly like him tonight. I would say, well, it's just he was like super chalk in the last slate.
Yeah,
about once a week, every 2 weeks, fading big chalk guy is sort of my thing. And I think I'm like, I don't know, 10 out of 13 on it on the year or something. Like there's definitely been a couple times I screwed it up and I was like, this guy's gonna be 50% owned. I would have little or none. And then that guy had a really good game. That's obviously a problem when that happens. But there's been a lot of times like this V thing, and I'm like, look, we project V for 30-something% owned right now. He's $4,200. He needs to have his career best game to be good in GPPs. Like he still has a career high of 26.5 DraftKings points.
That's what I was going to ask you earlier. I was going to say, is it like 24 fantasy points? Because that's all I've seen in his box scores. I mean,
it's 26, which is fine. He's 4,200. Cash made some sense to me, but tournaments like 30-40% owned. I'm like, I cannot choose to need a player to have the best game of his career on any given night. And at 30% owned, I will pick another guy in that price range. So today, 2%. Okay, now we're having a conversation.
Yeah, same exact price range, same exact player. You have Derrick Rose at 4.5 or 4.8, Jason Tatum at 4, Kobe White at 4. Now you start just getting to the 2%ers, Bruce Brown, Daniel Tice. Gafford comes in at 1.46% ownership.
Yeah, I can dig on that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And then Chris Dunn's are down here. Jahlil Okafor ended up with 1.17%. So some people, maybe you influenced that a little bit with the 3K play of the day.
Would have been 1.1% if I hadn't boosted it up there a little bit. But yeah, it's especially if you're not playing Jackson Hayes. Like I think he's next man in and has some sort of upside. And in theory, anyway, maybe picks up lots of time against, Enes Kanter, which is a good thing to be doing if you're a, inside guy. So he's probably my favorite 3K. So apologies ahead of time to that 17% of people who I put on the Primrose Path.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Less than 1% is Sekou, Markieff Morris, Christian Wood, Tony Snell, Langston Galloway, Nicole Melli. JJ Redick makes it at 0.17% ownership right there.
Congratulations. That 1/6 of 1% of people you have played yourself.
Yeah, that was it. That is, I believe, the only guy. Zion, 0.01% owned for Zion and Otto Porter. There you go. A couple people.
Wow, someone had a placeholder, which
And
again,
Jrue Holiday. Well, we got a lot of 1 or 2 lineups with these guys in them.
wow. Well, that is some ownership. Taking a last look at any breaking news before we get underway, but it was a pleasure to host the show with you, Sal.
Yeah, this was a ton of fun. Hopefully, we can do some more in the future. Thanks for having me. Fill in for old EMAC here. I appreciate it.
And anytime.
Yeah, no news yet. Okay, so I think I'm all good if you are.
I'm all set, sir.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thank you, Eddie, for spending your Saturday night the best way you possibly can here at Awesomo's YouTube channel, live before lock. Appreciate you all. If you hit the like button before you head out, hit that subscribe button. Keep an eye on the Anthony Davis news as well. It's huge. And like Eddie said earlier, late swapping, huge advantage that you're going to have over a ton of people, especially if you set your lineups up that way. But for right now, that is all from us, from Eddie, from myself, and everybody at awesemo.com. Have a great rest of your night and a great rest of your weekend.